Ladies and gentlemen, our service today honoring the memory of Sandra Mainwarring will be conducted by Rabbi Ehud Sela. Before we begin, please take a moment to make sure that your cell phones are off or silenced. Thank you.
Thank you for gathering with us today as we're here to pay this final loving tribute to Sandy Mainwaring. We're going to begin with chanting Psalm 23. If you'd like to follow along as I chant the Hebrew, it's in the booklets on pages 6 and 7. I'll begin by chanting the Hebrew, and then we'll all join together in the English. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar. Bino deshe yarbitzeini, al mei menuchot yenahaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheini b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit tzal mavet, lo yira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha, Hema yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, lishantav Hashem en roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov achesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, veshavti bebeit Adonai, lehorech yamim. Please join with me on page 7 at the top. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. To speak first, I'd like to invite up one of Sandy's dear sons, Mark.
Thank you all for coming. Just a quick disclaimer. If I look like I'm losing it, just give me a second and I'll be back online. Towards the end of my mom's life, at one point, I think she told all of us, she said, I'm leaving you, but you're not leaving me. And what she meant was, I think she's talking to the kids and probably everyone here, will be in her heart forever. So fast forward to 3 days ago. Merle and I are getting ready to come out here. And there's some fruit that I think might go bad in our absence. So I'm eating these plums, and her voice comes in my head. Mark, honey, you know you don't have to eat those. So she's not leaving me. Well played, Mom. How do you give a eulogy for your mother? Eulogy is good. It's speaking well of the person who's departed. But the mother is such a primal person in your life. They run when you cry. They clean your bottom. They are your nurse, your savior, your comfort. When you're growing up, they're your everything. When you get to be a teenager and young man, you feel like they don't know anything. And then when you get older, you realize how much more they've learned. But the mother's such a primal person in your life. It's like I'm sure that there were men in foxholes that say, I want my mama or I want my mother. I know that one time I was being pulled in an undertow in the beach one day, and I was underwater a lot longer than I would have liked. And the knee-jerk response is, I want my mom. Not that she's an expert swimmer. She wasn't even there. It's just so ingrained in your psyche. So the loss of a mother is like losing an arm. I mean, you could say, well, I'm sorry about it, but you just have to go on with it because it's a loss, and you have, it's a big deal, but you can't really get it back. One thing about her is that I thought she was a nice mom. In fact, one of my friends said, I'm definitely not going to miss the funeral of one of the, quote, cool moms. I live in Albany, Georgia. I'm a doctor there, and she always wanted to come out and see me. She never got around to it for one reason or another, and then she got sick. But one day I was taking advantage of the FaceTime technology to take a virtual tour and walk around with her, and I showed her the building, and I introduced her to and many of the people. They all afterwards said, your mom is so cute and so nice. And, who's really going to come up to anyone and say, dude, your mom's an idiot. I mean, no one's going to say those things. But just everyone who met her just thought she was nice and charming and very personable and pleasant. So, I mean, that was one thing that was very nice about her. And it made me think of a line from a Beatles song. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. In other words, you reap what you sow. And look at all the people here. She obviously touched a lot of lives, and I'm sure not everybody who would want to come is even here. She wound up being a great friend. And it was one of those things, especially these days, where it's almost like the etiquette that you never call someone. You text first and ask for permission. We could always call her. Hello? I'm in a movie. I can't really talk now. Like, Mom, you can use voicemail. It's okay. But, I mean, it was like, who else do you have that you could do that with? She grew up in a lean time. She was born in 1938, which was the end of the Depression. And she and I both share that gene for frugality. And also, we would save things. So if there's any comfort to the people here, the twig didn't fall far from the tree, because I got that gene as well. And so we grew up in a blue-collar household in Encino, kind of next to the people who had swimming pools and went to restaurants where they had tablecloths. And I think we always felt like we were poor. But having worked at one point in my life in Mississippi, we weren't poor. It's all relative. But it's one of those things that, like, both she and I shared the trait of never really being comfortable spending money. So her third husband, Dick, passed away, and she wound up becoming more financially comfortable. And I grew up to be a doctor, and I can afford some things, but it was still something that I could always call her up and say, Mom, guess what? What? I spent some money. What did you do? I bought the expensive orange juice. She's like, yay. So, I mean, that's one thing that, there's only so many things you resonate with. Then in terms of her illness, I stood in this exact spot in 1996 when my dad passed away, although of a heart attack, and I didn't have the best relationship with him. It was almost like, we don't get along, whatever, call me for your funeral, and that's what happened. And I was blustering my way through that, where my point was, don't carry a grudge. People could die. You got to bury the hatchet and appreciate the people who are in your family. But with my mom having a diagnosis of cancer, we had a long slide into home base to try to get everything discussed and address everything we could. And obviously we would want to have her here longer. But we had a lot of times that my brother and sister, I could discuss things on our mind. And even though cancer sucks, it was kind of a blessing to go that way. she went with courage and poise, and I'm glad she didn't have a lot of pain. But as a doctor, I can tell you, and even as a human, there are people who could complain way more than she did. I mean, as things started drifting away from her capabilities, she just was matter of fact about it. And she just felt like she was going on a journey and looked at it as a new adventure. We all had our routines of our certain time of day that we would call her. So like 8:30 at night when I'm done with work, that's when I'd call. It's very poignant to not have her to call. And Lori and David had their own time, and she could almost set her clock by when we would call as long as we didn't have the audacity to call during Jeopardy. But she was always a friend in that regard. And towards the end, I asked her, I said, so do you have any parting words, like words of wisdom? And she said, be kind, be kind, be kind. And then in the next breath, she said, and don't forget to order Brent's after the funeral. She had a strong focus on family and the importance of maintaining these relationships. And it turned out her last salvo was within a week of her passing away. We have 2 cousins, 2 nieces who don't have the best relationship. And she did an intervention. She brought them all together. And she wanted to say, my dying wish as your aunt is that you guys get along, because you only have one sister. And of course, with 40 years of not getting along, there was pushback. And at one point, one said, I'm different. And she rallied up and she said, you're different. He's different. She's different. I'm different. We're all different. I thought the next thing she was going to say, oh, Elizabeth is the big one. Here I'm coming. But she did it, and she wound up passing away later. And it was just a testament to how much the family was important to her. The other thing that she had a focus on, and that I am reminded of more poignantly, is the whole idea of having gratitude. I think there is so much garbage in the world today, and then you look around at all the love that's come to us, from all the people showing up here and having condolences and things like that, and the fact that you got to appreciate the people while you have them because they're not going to be here. I think that was an important lesson. I'm not a particular frequent poster on Facebook, but I put a thing up because I thought I just didn't want someone to say, well, you should have told me. And it's amazing, like, all the love that people pour in and the condolences, and there's really nothing anyone can do. Your arm's ripped off, it's ripped off. I mean, I guess that's why they have this black thing here to remind us. But one more thing. I just want to have a quick thank you or shout out to several people. Ina Main did a great job as a caregiver. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner became Benifer. They became Sandina. And they really had a good relationship. And hold on. Oh, she said Ina gets shit done. Anyway, I'll get the G version later. And the other thing I just need to just mention, I know it's about Sandy, but she's brought together brother and sister. So, just in the same vein as everyone saying that my mom was charming and nice, I see a lot of that in Lori, and she doesn't give herself enough credit. But you have it. And then the thing, I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing, but she was in a lot of theater when we were in school, and she liked theater afterwards. So I think she had a gay man inside of her. So she had to have David. So anyway, even though we spent a lot of time going through the house and finding all the things she squirreled away, and if you listen to carefully, you hear the sound of Merle's eyeballs rolling, that I'm not the same, but I thought I was a little better. But bottom line, Mom, I love you always. I will miss you, and hope one day I'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, I'd like to invite up Sandy's dear daughter, Lori.
That's a tough act to follow, Mark. Well, thank you all for coming today to support our family and to celebrate the life of an amazing woman, Sandy Mainwarring, my mom. Like Jerry Seinfeld, Mom was a legend who left the stage on her own terms in the height of her own glory. She approached the final stage of her life heroically. She considered her brush with cancer to be her last dance, a journey, her final adventure. Her curiosity, transparency, courage, and ultimate acceptance created a rich and sacred space that facilitated some major healing within our family. Since her diagnosis in late 2018, I had the honor and pleasure of spending every other weekend with her, flying up and back from Sacramento to help her prepare for this transition. Every night during my stays with her, I would offer her a foot massage as a part of her comfort care, which she enthusiastically accepted. We would share stories about our lives like whispering girls at a slumber party. It was one of the most loving, treasured, and healing experiences of my life. It was an opportunity for me to give back to her the glorious feeling of maternal love. In the last month, she chose her limited energy to impart her values, wisdom, and wishes to her children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews. In doing so, she was expressing herself authentically and communicating her love in action. I couldn't be more proud of the legacy that she was creating. Like many mother-daughter relationships, ours was a very textured relationship, which included periods of closeness and rocky patches. It was different than the relationships that she had had with my brothers. For many reasons and for many years, Mom and I had a strained relationship due to many family struggles and unresolved issues. But there's nothing like the cold wake-up call of a cancer diagnosis to get crystal clear about what's really important. This wake-up call, some not-so-subtle suggestions from my big brother, and a few years of therapy inspired me to let go of the past and forgive. As Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better. I learned a lot about being a loving daughter based on two terrific role models, my amazing daughter, Emily Hermann, and my son's loving wife, Paula Lerona Hermann. They both continually demonstrate how incredibly loving a daughter and a granddaughter can be. Mom's regular calls with Emily and Eli were one source of delight for her. And when Eli and Paula asked Mom to be the flower girl in their wedding, along with two of Paula's fourth grade students, Mom was a good sport and jumped at the chance. Just last month, when Eli and Paula gave Mom their holiday gift, she screamed with pure joy when she discovered that they made her a great grandmother. One of the things that I am most grateful for is that Mom blessed me with 2 amazing brothers. We have grown closer together while caring for her, and we became a more tight-knit family within ourselves and within the larger family system. In all her maternal glory, she paved the way for continual family closeness. Mom was experienced in assisting other loved ones through the end of their lives. She cared for her own mother. She cared for her third husband, Dick, and for her final partner, Bill, through their final days. She often wondered if she'd ever have a Sandy who would care for her like the way she cared for Nana, Dick, and Bill. Thankfully, she got something even better. She got Team Sandy, which consisted of the wonderful hospice care team through Kaiser, and Ina, Mom's live-in caregiver. She also had the benefit of Mark, Merle, David, and myself on a regularly rotating basis. Also on Team Sandy were her brother and sister-in-law, my Uncle Ronnie and Aunt Michelle, and her former sister-in-law, my Aunt Gloria. Her nieces, Karen and Stephanie, regularly checked in. Her other nieces and nephews, their spouses and children offered loving support, as well as the many, many other members of Team Sandy. One of the benefits that I had of spending so much time with Mom was being able to experience her vast social network. I could see firsthand how much she was loved, appreciated, and respected. Maxine Brower is one of Mom's dearest friends who was also on Team Sandy. Mom took so much comfort in her friendship with Maxine and looked forward to her daily check-in calls and cherished her warm, loving, and accepting nature. Mom also drew strength from her 75-plus year friendship with her childhood friend, Nathana Berman. Even though they lived on separate coasts, they stayed close and connected throughout their lives. Mom was predeceased by her third husband, Dick Mainwarring, whom she adored. Because of Dick, our family grew through the close bonds formed with Dick's extended family members, including Barbara and Bob Gibson and Barbara's sister, Sandy. Mom was also predeceased by her last partner, Bill Berg, whom she met during a grief support group within a few months after Dick's passing. Mom and Bill enjoyed several years together, and she was committed to him until the end. Because of this relationship, our family grew even further with the close bonds that she formed with Bill's son Neil, wife Rosalind, and their 2 daughters, Anna and Rebecca, and Bill's daughter Marcy and her husband Ken. In the early years, growing up on Weddington Street, Mom was a homemaker who volunteered in the Encino Elementary School PTA, and she served as a co-leader in my Girl Scout troop, Troop 1001. Over the years, my childhood girlfriends, Pam Dorr and Polly Bayless Mahoney, both kept tabs on Mom and shared with me that their lives were positively impacted as a result of knowing her. Mom lived large in her own authentic yet humble way, making many friends and touching many people's lives without a lot of fanfare. She lived her life staying true to her values of love, kindness, and consideration for others. On a scale of 1 to 10, according to our dearly departed Uncle Arthur, she was a 14. Mom died peacefully on her own terms, caring for her loved ones through the end, and made the world a better place. And she gifted me with a peaceful heart, knowing that we made most of the time that we had together. Mom really resonated with this passage and requested that it be read at her funeral. 4 things are beautiful beyond belief: the pleasant weakness that comes after pain, the radiant greenness that comes after rain, the deepened faith that follows after grief, and the reawakening to love again. Mom, I'm so grateful that we both reawakened an eternal love for one another. May we all rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Next, I'd like to invite up another dear son, David.
Mom's world was her children, her family, and her friends. Hundreds of photographs and some preserved home movies reveal a fairly cliché suburban life in the 60s and 70s in the San Fernando Valley, with birthday parties, family gatherings, camping trips, Hanukkah celebrations, Passover celebrations, trips to Santa Monica Beach with the Doors and the Mullins across the street. When Mom's sister, Anna, passed away in 1972, our cousin Stephanie Elfman joined our family for about 4 years. And despite the challenges of parenting 4 kids while Dad was busy working and supporting all of us financially, Mom did her best to maintain our family life. Of course, not all childhoods are made of peaches and cream, and we had our share of stresses and challenges within the household. But it's funny, as I reflected on what to share today, with the bulk of our pains and emotional traumas processed, what's left now is the arc of our collective lives, the bigger picture, with an emphasis and appreciation on what was good. In that vein, I'd like to share some of my fondest memories that involve my mom. I remember dinner tables at the kitchen table. Eating beef stroganoff and fractured tacos on Corningware dishes that still reside in her kitchen cupboards. I remember going shopping with her at Ralph's on Ventura and White Oak in our Country Squire station wagon with the wood paneling on the side. I remember peeking through the crack in the folding door near my bedroom and eavesdropping on Mom's conversations with the girls on Mahjong night. I remember participating with her in the Encino Elementary PTA school productions. I remember being in elementary school about 10 or 11 years old, running lines with my mom at the kitchen table. She played Wendy in Peter Pan, and when that came up in a recent conversation at the dining room table, we both looked at each other and said in unison, "Boy, why are you crying?" I remember thinking that Mom was so beautiful and that she looked like Elizabeth Taylor. Photographs of her from before we were born and during our childhood confirm that she was very stylish, often making her own clothes to make money. One of her best talents, in fact, was how to stretch a buck. We were a family of 5, and for a time 6, living on the budget of my father's single income, and she would often say in recent months that they barely had 2 pennies to scrape together. We felt that pinch often as kids, as Mark mentioned, mainly when we would see the fancy lives of some of our wealthier friends in Encino. But in truth and in hindsight, she and our father were able to provide us quite a lovely upbringing anyway. We all learned the value of stretching a penny, how to use a coupon, the value of saving a buck for a rainy day, the beauty of a homemade birthday card, and the importance of getting a good education so that we could support ourselves later in life. I remember thinking that she loved her Mahjong friends more than her children because Mahjong night would be the only time she'd buy the big bag of M&Ms to put out in the candy tray. I remember her routine of walking with me to the bus stop when I was in junior high school. She'd get her exercise for the day, and I would get some one-on-one time with her to talk about whatever was on my junior high school mind. I remember coming out to her at 18 and how she told me over and over and over that she just wanted me to be happy. She accepted my partner Van into her life fully and considered him her son-in-law. And for that, I will forever be grateful. I remember her willingness to do whatever and go wherever as long as she was part of the experience. Until she got sick last year, she would pretty much be willing to throw on her sneakers and go wherever the party took her. One of my fondest and sweetest memories that's emblematic of this quality involves a trip that she took to visit me when I lived in Houston in the early 90s. During one of these visits, I had a rehearsal for a concert with the Houston Gay Men's Chorus, and she offered to tag along. The image I have in my memory is of me sitting in a living room at one of the chorus members' homes, about 20 or 25 gay men of all ages, shapes, and sizes, sitting around, singing our music and chatting away, with Mom tucked into a wing-back chair, happily working on her needlepoint Kleenex box covers in the corner of the room. After every song, I'd look over, she'd give a look of approval and pipe in with a supportive, "Sounds great, guys. Keep it up." She just wanted to be included. Her identity was largely based on her family and her children, and as we all got older and moved out of the house, she begrudgingly met the challenge of creating a more independent life. Mom divorced our dad in 1982 and married Larry Stanberry in 1984. She lived in Chatsworth during those years, which were challenging years for her in some ways. I think primarily because she really had to carve out a future for herself and assert herself in the world in ways that she wasn't quite groomed for at that point. So just as we kids were branching out and creating our lives, she essentially was doing the same. She worked at Balboa Plaza Travel for many years, and although she was doing mostly bookkeeping, she was afforded the opportunity to take some trips and travel a bit with a few freebies here and there, and that made her very happy. One of her favorite things about life was having something to look forward to, whether it be a trip somewhere or an upcoming visit with a friend or family member, and she definitely passed that trait on to me. I remember sharing the love of theater with her. We would often reminisce about shows we'd seen or share the excitement of knowing one of us had tickets to something in the near future. I remember seeing Les Miserables with her at the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles sometime in the mid-'80s. For both of us, it was the first time we sat in the front row for a large theatrical event. We saw many shows together, and she was always interested about my travels to New York, wanting to hear all about what I'd seen on Broadway. Mom began square dancing with our father when I was still in high school. I remember the sound of her nylons rubbing together as she would walk down the hall from her bedroom in her dancing shoes with her poofy taffeta square dancing skirt. She continued square dancing until hitting the age of 80. When she started to lose steam physically, she remained involved with her group as an organizer. In the early 2000s, when her marriage to Larry ended, she opened a new chapter with Dick Mainwarring. They married in 2005, enjoying 6 years of marriage together before his death in 2011. During that time, they traveled the country together, including a few cruises on the East Coast and the Panama Canal, and they loved each other dearly. Then came her lovely partnership with Bill Berg, and they enjoyed a few years of loving companionship together until he unfortunately began to decline in health. All through that process, she remained at Bill's side as one of his biggest supporters, showing us again that her primary joy and purpose in life was to be there for others. She loved her family and never wanted to miss out on an opportunity for an experience. She also loved her friends and was filled up with so much life from having so many connections. With her Mahjong group, her Mexican train group, her square dancing group, her finance group, her Red Hat Ladies group, her Brandeis group, her painting class group, her Costco Wednesday hot dog group, her Valley Outreach group, her SOVA group, her Jewish War Veterans group, she made a couple friends. In fact, this was one of her greatest sadnesses about her illness, that she had to watch her connections with each of these groups slowly fall away, one at a time. But she never really complained about that. She just noted it in conversation and focused on what she did have in her life and kept herself involved in that until she couldn't anymore. She told me the night before she died that when she knew that even on a beautiful day a couple of weeks ago, when she wasn't able to gather the strength to go to Costco on a Wednesday, she knew she had crossed over a line and that she was near the end. When she was first diagnosed with lung cancer, and we had our first face-to-face opportunity to talk about the realities that lay ahead, she said she was looking at this as her last adventure, as Lori said. She told me about a year ago, "I know this is a one-way ticket, but I've never done this before, so I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen." When I asked her if she was afraid of dying, she said no, just disappointed. She wanted to stick around for the party, to have things to look forward to, But she shared with me that she thought when she finally transitioned, it would be like going to sleep, like turning the lights out, and there was no fear. On the night before she died, she said to me in a whispered voice, "You know, I think I've accepted that my life as I knew it is over. It's over. I'm over the bridge." She did say she was hoping to hold out for another week to see her friend Maxine, who is coming back from Australia today, to see her one last time. She told me to remember to pass along the value of being good to people. She told me that she felt that she was becoming a bit of a burden, asking me, "Isn't this hard on you? Doesn't it make you tired coming here so much, taking time out of your lives?" I told her, no, not exactly. But yes, we were impacted by her and by going through this experience with her. But that's kind of the point of showing up, I said, where we get rewarded with the precious opportunity to participate in this experience with you and your dying process. What a privilege. She said, "That's an interesting way to look at it." And so she guessed she was glad to have had the opportunity to experience this part of the human lifespan. She noted how grateful that she wasn't in pain. And in fact, she was surprised that there wasn't as much pain as she thought there would be as she got closer to dying. Before I close, I must thank Ina for her attentive and caring involvement in our mom's care. Your presence offered so much peace and comfort, not only to our mom, but to the extended family, and allowed for us to process our feelings about this experience at a much deeper level. So, Mom, rest in peace. Contrary to what you may have thought about yourself at times, your life had great meaning and will continue to have meaning as we carry you with us and continue to share you with the world. We will hold you in our memories as long as we live. We remember your name, your face, your voice, your wisdom, your generosity, your gracious smile, and most of all, your loving kindness and unconditional love. And thank you all for coming to celebrate her life.
Thank you, David. Next, I'd like to invite our dear brother, Ron.
I'd like to thank you all for coming here today as well, and just like to point out, my sister really did a great job in raising these 3 children. I'm really proud of them. Growing up, Sandy and I lived 2 lives. We lived in Boston, Mass. For the first 10 years of my life and the first 16 years of hers. Our family lived on a dead-end street with a hill at the end that we called the Rockies. There were 6 3-story apartment buildings on the street, and there were 4 units in each apartment building. They were 3 stories high. So there were a total of 72 families that lived on 1 block. There were even a couple of houses that near the end of the street that were single-family houses, and this was 1 block long. I used to think the street was huge, but it turns out when I went back later as an adult, there's room for 1 car on one side, 1 car on the other, and 1 in the center. That was the whole thing. I played outside with kids my own age, and I watched my 2 older sisters interact with kids their age as we all grew up together. Everybody on the street knew everybody else, and it was like a little community of its own. I spent a lot of time with my 2 older sisters growing up. So they basically both raised me while my parents worked at their mom and pop variety store that they owned in Jamaica Plains, which is a suburb of Boston. My mother was the matriarch of our family. My mother was about this tall, and she ruled the roost. Whatever she said went with all her brothers and sisters, and she had a lot of them. And she came home one day and said, "We're moving to California," just out of the clear blue sky. She had taken trips out here, and she liked what she saw, and she said, I've had enough of Boston, the winters, and all that crap that goes with it. So shortly after, we packed our belongings into a U-Haul trailer, and one of our neighbors down the street heard that we were leaving and said, "Could we go too?" So they followed us to California. My parents sat in the front, Sandy and I sat in the back, and we traveled to California. By that time, my sister Anna had gotten married and was living her own life in California. While we were driving across Georgia, my father had a kidney stone attack, and we wound up spending a few additional nights in Tallapoosa, Georgia. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but you can see that off in the distance. When I was growing up, there was only one thing that Sandy and I argued about, and that was the television. Being older than me, she felt that she deserved to be in control of the television. If I was sitting and watching one of my favorite programs, made no difference what it was, on one of the 3 channels that we had, she would walk up to the TV, there were no remote controls in those days, and just change the channel. She didn't care if the channel we switched to was displaying the test pattern or another thing. She just wanted to let me know that she was in charge. Later on in my adult life, she reminded me also who was in charge. In 1984, Michelle and I made plans to go on a family vacation to Lake Tahoe with our friends, the Goodfrieds. However, a few days before, I was laid off from my job at Superior Industries, which was somewhat of a shock. We considered canceling the trip, but since Scott and Tracy were looking forward to the vacation, we decided to go ahead with it. However, after spending a few days in a motel and feeling uncertain about our future, we decided to cut the trip short. As it turns out, Sandy and her husband Bob and their 3 kids were camping within the trailer ground, on a trailering campground at Lake Tahoe. At the same time we were there, so she invited us to spend the last night with her and the kids. However, when it came time to bed down for the night, there was a problem. There was only enough sleeping space in the trailer for Scott and Tracy, not us. Michelle and I were told that we would have to spend the night in sleeping bags in the back of our Ford station wagon. Small problem, though. Even though it was summer, the nighttime temperature was in the low 30s. It wasn't too bad when the 2 of us huddled together for warmth, but about 1 in the morning, I had to go to the bathroom. Well, the campground bathroom was about a half a block away, and I hurried down there, did my business, and hustled back to the station wagon as fast as I could. But it took me about 40 minutes for my body to stop shaking and my teeth to stop shaking. So much for Sandy's hospitality. My nieces and nephews and I often accuse my sister of being unable to make decisions. It took her forever to make up her mind about something or to make a change anything. However, this indecision did not carry on over into her romantic life. Well, I have been married to the same person, my lovely Michelle, for about 52 years. My sister was married 3 times. In addition, in later years, had a significant other in her life. She was married to Bob the longest, and together they raised these 3 great kids. However, theirs was not a marriage made in heaven, and along the way she met and later married Larry, despite the opposition she received from everybody in the family. Several years later, she realized the family was right, and Larry divorced, and they went their separate ways. It was at the end of their marriage to Larry that Sandy met Dick Mainwarring. He swept her off her feet, literally and figuratively, while they were square dancing. Dick was the president of Farmers and Charmers, the square dancing club that Sandy and Larry belonged to. Sandy was the club's, Larry was the president, and Sandy was the vice president of the club. And Sandy professed that Dick was just as good a friend, but after she and Dick dropped by one day to visit Michelle's mother, who was in the hospital, Faye astutely remarked and took us aside and said, "She's more than just Sandy's good friend." He is, not her. There was no question that Sandy was the love of Dick's life. Eventually, the 2 of them married and had a wonderful life together until Dick contracted mesothelioma. This was a result of his many years working in the on air conditioning units while he was in the Navy. Shortly after Dick's passing, Sandy met Bill Berg at the bereavement group. He had recently lost his wife, and the two of them became loving companions, until unfortunately he became ill. Sandy cared for Bill at home and then oversaw his care at the board and care facility that he was in until his passing. After Bill's passing, she enjoyed the rest of her life spending time with friends from the Square Dancing Club, getting together with people that she met at the Sova Food Pantry, and she especially enjoyed Hot Dog Wednesdays at Costco. And she and her friends would congregate at lunch. Then about 15 months ago, Sandy was diagnosed with lung cancer. She tried doing chemo, but the side effects were too much for her and caused issues with her heart. She rationalized that she had lived a good life and made the decision to just live out the rest of her life and let the cancer run its course. It was only in the last few months that she developed breathing issues that foretold the end was coming. When confronted with an issue, Sandy's motto was, "I think I'll just go with the flow." And she did just that. Our family is extremely grateful to Ina, and I know Ina hates me saying this, but she's a saint. She took the most wonderful care of Sandy till the very end. Sandy was my connection, to all our friends and relatives from the past. She remembered things that happened in the past, and she had the gift that most women have of being able to remember people's names, the names of their children, their grandchildren, the relationship of everybody, and who was married to what, or whom. My sister had an insight into our family that always amazed me. She had a way of comforting me when I would describe a situation. And to her, she was able to offer a different perspective to the situation that always made sense. I will miss that the most. I guess the time finally came when her body signaled that she had endured enough, that it was time to say goodbye. I hope that she's at peace now, and she's together with our parents and our other family friends in a better life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I had the pleasure of knowing Sandy a little bit these past few years. I met her through Bill Berg, who was a member of my synagogue. As you heard, they met in the grief support group. And I got to see how, even though they had only known each other for a short period of time before he began to suffer the devastations of dementia, how genuinely devoted she was, how deeply she cared for him in his final few years. And I really understood through that the kind of person that she was, how deep her kindness, the deepness of her caring and her compassion. And that was just one example that I saw, but it was true, obviously, as you heard, throughout her life. At the end of the book of Daniel, it speaks about life and death and the meaning of our lives. Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 says, "They that turn many to righteousness are as the stars forever and ever." So we live on in the impression that we have made in other people. And when that impression is a good one, then it reverberates across the generations. Now that impression can certainly be made through words, but how much the more so through deeds. And as you heard, Sandy's lived her life with such a generosity of spirit, so much love, so much caring for her family, for her friends. I know that the impression that she made on you is not going to fade anytime soon. It lingers. She continues to have an effect on you even after her death. And like sailors in the night, the light from her stars will guide you home safely. Her example is like a beacon of moral clarity. So how should you think about the meaning of Sandy's life, and what part of her will you carry on with you? What were her guiding principles? The rabbis teach that you should repent one day before you die. But how do you know what day that will be? Ah, they say, that's the point. You have to live each day as if it was your last. But it's hard to live that way. It would almost be too frivolous. Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher, said 2,000 years ago, there's a basic contradiction in the human animal, in the truth that man always complains that his days are few, and then always acts as if there is no end to them. I think Sandy actually lived going back and forth between those two poles. On the one hand, as you heard, she was so active, never missing an opportunity to do something. She truly lived her life to the fullest and tried to share it with every person she loved. She was simply the most dedicated person I think I've ever heard of. In Yiddish, we call this person a Hermann, a person who likes to have their people around them. She understood life is better lived with friends, with family, to share it. You heard about all the activities, whether it was social or charitable, giving back. Sandy was always in the thick of it. So she was really living her life in the moment and making the most of her moments. But then on the other hand, there was a part of her that was a little bit of a worrier, a planner for the future. She knew that you have to think about the future. You have to plan for it, otherwise you might miss an opportunity or you might get caught in a bad situation. So she would squirrel away a few dollars for a rainy day. She'd make sure to still get in her 10,000 steps so she could be healthy. She'd take whatever freebies a store would give away because you never know when you might want to use it. As we heard, Sandy really made the most of her life after her diagnosis, and she understood what it meant, and she used these last few months to try and resolve some long-simmering issues in the family. So what's the measure of Sandy's life, and how do we mourn for her? When Abraham lost his beloved wife Sarah, it says in the Torah simply that Abraham came to weep for her. The Hebrew word is livkotah. But strangely in the Torah, one of the letters is written smaller than all of the others. And the rabbis teach that this means that while he cried for her, he didn't shed a lot of tears. It wasn't that he wasn't sad. They said it wasn't that he didn't love her. But rather they teach that his sadness was tempered by his memories of their life together. That Sarah had left him with such a harvest of rich and vivid memories. That her life was of such worth and beauty that it softened his grief. So he shed some tears, but he also gave thanks to God for all the years that they were blessed to share. I think so too with Sandy. It's right to weep for her, but not too much, for she's left you with a harvest of rich and vivid memories. And you can treasure the time that you shared with her and carry on her values in her name. Tiheh zichra baruch, may her memory always be for a blessing. Please rise as I'm going to chant the El Malei Rachamim Memorial Prayer. If you want to follow along, it's in the books on pages 20 and 21. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה מעלות קדושים הטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת שינה בת צבי הרשל וחייקה של חלי עולמה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. לכן ברחמים יסתירה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ויצרור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of your divine presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, to Sandy Mainwarring, who has gone to her eternal home. Author of mercy, bring her under the shelter of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. May you be her inheritance, and may her repose be in peace. And we all say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, we will be leaving the chapel and proceeding to the interment site. We will be exiting through the doors in front of you and to your left, following behind the casket bearers and immediate family. Because the interment site is a walking distance from the chapel, we will have a walking procession. We will be walking with the family behind the coach. Following the service, family invites you to join them at Sandra Mainwaring's residence, and driving directions will be provided as you exit the chapel. Following have been asked to serve as casket bearers: Ron Yoffe, Mark Wolgin, David Wolgin, Brian Kahn, Scott Yoffe, and Eli Hermann. Because the service is still in progress, please do not approach the family at this time, inside or outside the chapel. Please wait until the service concludes at the graveside, then you can express your condolences. Casket bearers, please come forward.
Please rise and then follow behind us in procession.
Avoteinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, u'Yevarech, v'Yirapeh et hacholim. Mishebeira, Avoteinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel v'Leah, u'Yevarech, v'Yirapeh et hacholim.